found this video about cave diving gone wrong and I want to watch it with you.
Father took his 15-year-old son to one of the most dangerous caves, only for the frigid depths to claim their lives in a tragic, desperate struggle for air, against countless warnings. In 2014, Darren Spivey, a 35-year-old avid scuba diver, wanted to share his love for diving with his 15-year-old son, Dylan. So on Christmas Eve, Darren gave Dylan scuba tanks as an early present.
Okay.
They were both eager to use them, planning a dive for the next morning on Christmas.
Brand new gear?
The following morning, the father and son got up and made their way to a local dive site, only to discover that the gate to the dive site was locked. The father still really wanted to do this dive and decided he would take them to another dive site in Central Florida, which was inside of a wildlife management area that he knew was open 24/7 to hunters, hikers, and divers. The pair drove over to the entrance of this park, and sure enough, it was open. They got out of the car, put on their wetsuits and scuba gear, and began waddling their way over to a wooden walkway that starts in the parking lot and goes all the way up and out onto the pond like a dock. As they walked down this wooden walkway, they would have passed a number of signs telling them, "Do not dive in this pond unless you're an expert diver."
Okay, I really hope they were expert divers because that looks dangerous.
Because this was not just some pond. This pond was the entrance to the infamous and deadly Eagle's Nest, which in the cave diving community is known as the Mount Everest of cave diving. At the bottom of this little placid-seeming pond is a narrow hole that is a tunnel that goes straight down, and that is the single way in or out of this massive underwater cave system. Expert divers will swim over to this hole, grab the guideline that goes down into this cave, and follow it. They'll swim straight down until the light above them fades, and all they can see below them is just black nothingness.
Basically, like any lake diving, but okay.
Once they get through the end of this tunnel, it opens up into a massive chasm called the ballroom. As soon as you get into the ballroom, if you stop and shine your light in any direction, you will not see a wall. No matter how powerful your flashlight is, you can't see a wall. It's so big. Divers that have been down there have said it feels like you're in outer space. This guideline goes straight down to the bottom of the ballroom at about 130 feet.
Still in the limits of recreational diving.
At which point you see a sign that has a Grim Reaper on it that says, "Stop. Prevent your own death. Do not go any farther. There's nothing in this cave that is worth dying
that's really
for."
creepy, and I really hope they didn't go further.
Basically, this is your last chance to turn around and get to the surface relatively easily, because from this sign, the cave splits off in two different directions where the tunnel gets narrower and it kind of spiders around. In certain points, it goes all the way down to 300 feet. Beyond this sign, it is extremely dangerous unless you know what you're doing, and even then it's still extremely dangerous. There's also a current that runs through Eagle's Nest, so
Oh god, I really hope they were know what they were doing.
if you were to lose the guideline, especially in the ballroom, you could be blown away and then have a really hard time finding it again because it's pitch black down there and it's like finding a needle in a haystack. If you're not holding onto the guideline, it's nearly impossible to find the one way out.
I'm scared just looking at this.
A lot of divers have died trying to do these types of dives. And the thing is, at these depths, small mistakes can cost lives. The sign is there just as a warning to help prevent any future accidents.
Yeah. That's why it's important to have a certification. Don't go cave diving without a certification.
But as Darren and Dylan sat at the end of the walkway getting ready to jump into this pond, they were unfazed by the countless warnings, even though neither of them were expert divers. In fact, Dylan wasn't even a certified diver at all.
Sorry.
This was one of his first dives.
Why? What about swimming pools? Why would you bring your 15-year-old son, not certified, with brand new gear to one of the deadliest dive sites in the world?
Before the pair jumped into the water, Darren texted his fiancée and said they were at Eagle's Nest and they were about to do this dive and that he would call when they got back to the surface. After that, he put his phone away on the surface and the two of them jumped into the water and started swimming their way over to the entrance to Eagle's Nest. Hours went by and Darren's fiancée did not get a call from Darren. By the time the sun was going down, she decided she had to go check on them.
Okay.
She hopped in the car and drove to the parking lot at Eagle's Nest. She saw Darren's car, but no sign of the boys anywhere. Police were called, and very quickly professional divers were brought to Eagle's Nest to go down and see if they were still down there. The divers got in the water, made their way over to the narrow entrance, went down the tunnel, entered into the ballroom, and stopped holding on to the guideline. They pulled out their flashlights and began scanning around the ceiling immediately inside of the ballroom because they had done this before, and it was not uncommon to have fatalities inside of caves be near the entrance.
These poor guys.
As they were scanning around, they stopped when they saw Dylan's lifeless body trapped up against the ceiling about 6 feet away from the entrance.
No, so close.
He had inflated his water wings, which are emergency flotation devices. His mouthpiece was out of his mouth, and it would turn out he had no more air left in his tanks.
Oh God, that's terrible.
After the divers retrieved Dylan's body, they went back into Eagle's Nest and went all the way down, following the guideline to the bottom of the ballroom where they found Darren. He was laying on a little sandy hill. His mouthpiece was out. He also had no air left in his tanks, and he was laying right next to the famous sign that has the Grim Reaper on it that says, "Stop. Prevent your own death. Don't go any farther." Both Darren and Dylan's gauges showed they'd gone down to 230 feet.
What? Wait, let me just double check how much this is. 230 feet, 2 meters, is 70 meters. What were they doing?
For reference, between 0 and 130 feet is considered recreational diving. And so in those depths, you can breathe regular air. The same air you breathe on the surface is the air that goes in your tanks. You don't need really special training. You can kind of do whatever you want in those depths.
Well, you can, but if you want to dive again, you better check some
Below
stuff,
130
like
feet, you need to breathe a special gas mix, you need special equipment, and you definitely need specialized training.
Yes.
All three of those things Dylan and Darren did not have. After an investigation was done into their deaths, it was determined it was an accident.
Yeah.
The going theory was they went through the entrance into the ballroom, went all the way down, and then went into one of the 2 tunnels that spiders off to the side. They managed to go all the way down to 230 feet, and at that depth, they must have developed a nasty case of nitrogen narcosis, which is like being drunk. In that state, they must have lost track of time and how much air they were using. By the time they got back to the ballroom to begin their ascent, they ran out of air. The son must have run out first, grabbed his father, and shown him his air gauge to point out that he had no air left. His dad, in seeing that, must have taken his regulator out and put it in his son's mouth, and they began buddy breathing as they ascended to the exit. However, the father's tanks also ran out of air very shortly after that. The father passed out and sank to the bottom. The son managed to get a full breath of air and began trying to swim as fast as he could to the surface. He even inflated his water wings to make himself go faster.
That's why they were inflated.
Except in his panic, he must have let go of the guideline, swam all the way up, hit the ceiling, and then, not able to find the way out, ultimately drowned. Today, despite all the warnings outside and inside of the cave itself telling inexperienced divers to not go any farther, inexperienced divers continue to go into Eagle's Nest. And inexperienced divers continue to die inside of Eagle's Nest.
Why would you do that? Okay, this is really terrible what happened, but I think we can all learn something from this. Don't do something you're not certified for, you're not qualified to do. Don't do something reckless. Don't go to dangerous dive sites, especially if you have no idea what you're doing. Plan your dive and then stick to it. I know I make a lot of jokes and memes about it, but stick to your plan. Calculate already beforehand how much gas you will need depending on the depth, on the time you're planning to stay, and don't forget to calculate also a bit more gas in case your body has an emergency so that you can also bring him back alive. That's all. Thank you for listening. Good night. I hope you won't have too many nightmares now.